All righty. So thanks for the kickoff. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody, wherever in the world you may be. We wanted to take a moment here and share with you one of the presentations we had done at Think. Since the presentations were made available, but no recording was done, we felt this conversation, how a modern data protection environment can help you do more than just protect your business. And I'd like to personally thank Pawel for helping from Storeware for helping to put this together. On today's panel, what we'll do is we're going to ask us a few questions. You have myself, Steve Kenniston. I work in business development for IBM. Also on the phone, you have Rob Coventry, who's the Vice President of Worldwide Technical Strategy for IBM Software Defined Solutions. And you have Pawel, who's the CTO, Vice President for Storeware. So good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for joining.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so what we'll do in starting this presentation, let me just take a quick step back and just cover some highlights for us real quick. It's only take a couple of minutes. So when we think of backup or data protection, there are some trends that are going along. And the one thing that we wanted to do is really make sure that that we all understand that when we're doing backup or data protection, that the first thing you'll want to make sure of is that you have application and data recovery. That's always first and foremost and key in any protection strategy, right? The next thing we saw data protection kind of evolve into disaster recovery, and that evolved even a little bit further into business continuity. And I'll explain why I think this is important. So disaster recovery was about, yes, having copies of your data, having them in a place where we were disaster resilient. And then came along, okay, we're going to do that. If we're building against a disaster, that means the building may be gone, servers may be gone, not just the data. So how do we have business continuity? This plays, and I'll skip over 4 for a second, this plays very similarly to cyber resiliency. Cyber resiliency meaning if you're attacked, it's not just is the data attacked, does that attack go even broader than just my data? So I look at business continuity and cyber resiliency a lot in the same, and we're having a lot of cyber resiliency conversations lately, and I think we're gonna hit on that as a part of this conversation this afternoon. And then you have this notion that we've started to see a lot of over the last 4 to 5 years, and it comes around the notion around copy data management, or really application or data reuse. So we're finding more and more clients who do a good job at backing up 100% of their environment want to have the capability and the ability to leverage that data for more than just backup purposes for recovery in the event of a data loss or something. But they want to leverage it for things like DevOps or reporting or analytics and that sort of thing. So these are the trends that we're seeing when it comes to data protection. Now, when you think about developing a modern backup strategy, we can extract ourselves from the products for a second, and let's look at some of the key capabilities that we want to make sure that you're achieving, or what you can achieve with a modern backup environment. And the first thing, I think I boil this down to 5 key things, right? And the first thing is really lower cost. A lot of the newer technologies, they're easier, quicker to build, and by being like that and being able to be developed quickly and easily, a lot of the costs have come down in the newer, more modern data protection products. If you lower your CapEx, you're going to lower your ongoing CapEx, because that's typically either buying a few more licenses or paying maintenance, and maintenance is usually a percentage of that original purchase price. You have improved performance, and that means not getting data from point A to point B, but your RPOs and your RTOs. And because you now have the ability to take snapshots of data with these more modern technologies, your recovery, first of all, your capture of the data is near instantaneous, as is your recovery. We move on to simple SLA management, or simple data management overall. And what we're finding now is, with today's building in design thinking into a lot of the principles and practices of today's UIs and customer experiences, we're finding these things becoming much easier to manage. When you do that, you're also lowering your operational expense. The next step we come to is multi-cloud enablement. So we're finding a lot of these new solutions are able to be multi-cloud enabled, specifically because it's much easier knowing that these are targets when in the initial design of a lot of these products, that these are targets, not just tape, not just disk, but cloud capabilities, they're being designed with that in mind as they're being built, making it a lot easier to reach out to those capabilities. In addition, having things like S3 connectivity and that sort of thing, new standards come along as making the connectivity to a lot of these devices a lot easier. And then finally, this enhanced business agility. We talked about data reuse in the last slide, but ultimately it's how do I take advantage of this data? I'm doing all this work, I'm doing all this heavy lifting, I'm collecting all this data. I should be able to use it for something besides just backup and recovery. So when you think of a modern backup strategy, right, those are some of the things you need to be thinking about as you're moving along the paradigm of thinking about how do I enable or create a new modern solution, or why would I want to go about doing this? So now what I'd like to do is open up the panel for some questions. I think we're all going to kind of jump in and dive in here. And Pawel, maybe I'll start with you. As we talked about, we're seeing a lot more data reuse playing a key role in data protection modernization. You as a partner see a lot of different customers for a lot of different reasons and different capabilities that go beyond backup. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out there in the market?
So for me, personal reuse is to get the advantage of the data. And we are used to, get the legacy backup protection systems are, just grabbing the data and storing into the backup repository, like a tapes, or latest time on a cloud. But, just, copy, put on a backup repository or archive, and doesn't do anything about it, yes? Right now, for me, modernize, it means I can use it not only from the backup purposes, but I can use it from my DevOps perspective. I can play with it from the disaster recovery capabilities. I can play with it for the BI system, so kind of the analytics. So the question is, can my modern data protection can be used just to get more from this data than typical backup? So my opinion, reuse is to get as much as possible of this data from the secondary storage philosophy. Rob, would you like to comment on it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Pawel. I mean, basically, the more data is used, the more valuable it becomes. And so when you're putting it away and saving it for the purposes of disaster recovery or some sort of smaller problems, that kind of diminishes the value of that data. Whereas if I can, while I'm moving it into the permanent archive, have a secondary purpose for the sake of business intelligence, and artificial intelligence is becoming a larger use of data these days, the more I can get some value, right? And you already mentioned lifecycle management and rapid development. And the more that I can apply that data, the more valuable it becomes to the business. And so therefore, the cost of putting it into that secondary location becomes diminished because of the value that the business returns from it.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add to that, Rob, all great points. I would also add that in my meetings and conversations with clients, and I think this could pertain to a lot of the three use cases here we're going to hit upon, but more and more clients are trying to figure out, how do I get a bigger bang for my buck? And what I mean by that is not just necessarily about the data, but the tools I'm using to do specific jobs. How can I do more with them, right? I invest a lot of money in infrastructure, and whether that infrastructure is hardware or software, how do I maximize the use of it? So now that my backup application can do things like move data to a repository and keep it safe for in case something happens, now I have a tool that can actually also complementary reuse that data, pull it up in a non-production environment to be used for multiple use cases. Now I'm doing more with less, and that's just something that we're seeing a lot of.
And everybody is used to, comparing that this backup is like an insurance policy. Right now, if we have modernized and data reuse in action, we can say that it's all the time active policy. So we don't need to wait for something, happen like data loss. but we can go to the business and saying, hey, we can do more with this kind of the approach. So we need to be aware that for us, as modernization is to get the most value from the data that we stored on a different location.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, so let's move along. So our next topic here would be, how do you see multi-cloud playing a key role in data protection modernization? And I know we talk a lot about cloud lately. I think the number one use case for cloud is acting as a repository for data protection. But maybe we start with you this time, Rob. Do you have a thought around how you see multi-cloud having an impact in a modern data protection environment?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, this whole notion of multi-cloud is the advancement of cloud computing, right? And being able to start to advance your application development in kind of a self-service purpose, right? So the ability to provide data protection in that environment is critical.
Great. And I think I would add that the multi-cloud angle, right? A lot of people say, well, what do we mean by multi-cloud? And we know from a lot of the conversations, especially in the Think kickoff that Ginny had talked about, where we know clients are using more than one cloud, as many as 5 clouds are being used in an environment. The reason why multi-cloud becomes so important is back to that first conversation, I think, is the data reuse. Yeah. I want to be able to reuse data in an environment that makes me productive. So maybe I'm in marketing and I use Google Cloud for analytics and I want to do reporting there. Or maybe I'm in development and I want to use Amazon's cloud for some DevOps. I want to make sure that I have the ability to be able to push and reuse data in each one of these environments. And I think that's how multi-cloud is playing a much broader role than just one repository in any one cloud for protection. Pawel, I'd be interested to hear your comments.
Well, we call it in store that it should be a freedom of choice. So it means that we don't want to push customers to vendor lock into the one cloud vendor. So we saying you should use S3, you should use Swift, you should use any type of the managed service provider that can allows you to store the data, but not only store it like you said, but coming back to the reuse. Maybe later on you will use it from the disaster recovery as a service purposes. Maybe you would like to play with this data later on for the different kind of the purposes. So the data protection platforms, it's actually a new role. How to align and how to use the multi-cloud approach to get to give the bigger value. And of course, it's important from the cost perspective. What I see from my customers and the partners ecosystem, that we've been talking about the disaster recovery as a service for the many years, but since the last years, we see the huge movement into this area, but also from the backup as a service side. So, like I said, in the forefront, it's a freedom of choice. We cannot, close our customers into the one cloud bucket.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Okay, so let's talk about the third thing that we were talking about in this whole evolution of data protection. And let's talk about, Rob, something I know that's really close to your heart is cyber resiliency. You've done a lot of work and research in your strategy role here at IBM, thinking about cyber resiliency and how it plays a part. And I think it's broader than data protection, but data protection does play a key role. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts there?
Well, so you touched on the biggest point is, first of all, there's a much bigger role here beyond just storage, but storage has an important role to play. Let me kind of first set the stage. From a cost perspective, the cost of not addressing cyber resiliency is enormous. And the risk is becoming higher and higher every day. I mean, we just throw out some numbers, right? I mean, $310 million per event is the estimate that Pawel estimates for a given cyber event. $200,000 an hour is what IDC puts the cost at. And Pawel says your chances of having an event is 1 in 4. And these hackers are getting into your environment and sitting around for over 196 days. So the reality, the cost is insurmountable. And so the old-fashioned way of just saying, I'm going to put a brick and mortar around my environment and create a moat and set of drawbridges to keep people out, that's not enough, because essentially the reality is people are inevitably going to get in. So what you've got to do is put a strategy that addresses, of course, having those layers of security, but also assume that they're going to get in, and then, what are you going to do to address it? Kind of shifting to detection, response, and recovery, which is, we in IBM have put a lot of energy around building capabilities in our tooling and our storage offerings to address those kind of things. From an identification perspective, knowing when things change. From a response and recovery perspective, just knowing that you've got a reliable recovery set of tools that give you an ability to put things back and automate it in a way that, when you've got a massive outage, that you can trust that your automation is going to get you back up and running, because that, at the end of the day, is the most important thing, is the ability to recover and get back up and running your business should one of these things happen.
And not to scare everyone, but Rob, I've heard you say a few times, it's not if they get in, it's when they get in, right?
That's right.
It's inevitable. We're hearing more and more conversations. I think I made the analogy during Q4 or Q3 last year. It came up a couple times. Q4 came up a dozen times. Q1 it's come up, a couple dozen times. The velocity in which we're hearing comments and questions around cyber resiliency and how we can be helpful in this role is growing more and more and becoming more and more important. As I talk to customers, Pawel, how about as you talk to customers? Are you hearing more around cyber resiliency?
I'm hearing more and more, coming back conversation about the tapes. So this is a funny situation when, tapes dead, all the time coming back, because, to give a fully immutable system, the tape, is just a physical way how to get the offsite. So it gives me a way that the tapes will be with us for many years still, not only in the data center, but in every space, in small SMB and bigger accounts. But if the customers doesn't want to think about the tapes itself, I'm thinking that bad guys is all the time watching, and we got a number of the insights that we have more and more attacks today. So
Paul, I have a question for you. I mean, we've been having this discussion internally about this notion of air gap, right? And there's, tape is the only true, we'll call it pure air gap. But the reality is there's additional, I'm going to call immutable forms that are introduced with things like, our cloud object store and our safeguarded copy, local snapshot special services on some of our block storage. And so that provides layers of immutability, if you will, in my mind, right? Layers of air gap capability. And I think one of the strategies you've got to employ with cyber resiliency is those various layers that are basically balancing cost and business resilience and performance, those three dimensions.
I remember when I, designed the data protection platforms, even 12, 14 years ago, and it was based on Spectrum Protect. So we have a tiers of the storage for the migration purposes, and we always need to think about the plan A, B, and C. Right? And I think the cyber resiliency and this thinking about the air gap and building the layers is again the question: should we get the plan C? And the answer is, of course, yes, we do. So the tape is one of the simplest reason how we could build in the easiest way the plan C. Of course, in most scenarios, the tapes are not used at all. So thinking about the different part of the layers based on the snapshot, based on the different storage to build in this air gap is really crucial. It's not easy today. So I think this is what I see, this cyber resiliency investments in the modernized data protection has just started, yes?
So your three layers applies exactly what Steve talked about earlier in terms of secondary use, right? I mean, we could use these, we'll call kind of additional layers of mutability as that kind of B level, right, tier. provide that for secondary use purposes, and oh, by the way, provide also a layer of resiliency as well. More rapid resiliency, but then of course the trade-off is, it also cycles over. You eventually write over it, and so if that 196 day, how long it typically takes for you to detect one of these cyber criminal attacks, if that overruns the local copies, then you're having to use that C level layer of recovery as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, and also from the SLA perspective, I cannot imagine right now the modernized data protection without the snapshot capability. Yes.
Yep.
So connecting snapshot management, which gives you actually the instant capability of restoration, with the long-term retention philosophy. SPP has, for example, integration with the Spectrum Protect in the end, yes, or with the S3 connectivity. So we need to think about how to get, if the bad guy is coming, how to get the instant restore, but we should also think about the other layers, even if sometimes there are old school layers that are the most appropriate. So we should flexible mix different types, yes?
Agreed. I mean, you mentioned, a recent update that we put into SPP is this offload capability. I hate to use that term. I'd like to incorporate this notion of cyber resiliency, right? Because it's kind of the C level, the A, B, and the C, right? So it's pulling data from the A layer, putting it into a B layer, but you can't afford to keep everything there. So you need an ability to also shift it to that C layer for longer term retention and resiliency.
We should build the term ABC layer. Yeah. This is a good one. The easiest representation, but this is how it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like where you guys are going there. Rob, you said it, and I think you nailed it, right? There's always a balance and a trade-off between cost and performance, no matter whether it's an array or whether it's software or it's backup stuff that you need to accomplish a particular task. And maybe one thing we haven't done as good a job of doing, but highlighting some of the key things that we've done in our existing portfolio around data protection for cyber resiliency. You kind of briefly mentioned the ability to detect anomalies in your dedupe data and highlight a warning to you that and this comes around the NIST the detect phase.
Right.
And there's something going on here, right? Using more and more AI, as IBM will do in its backup environments, to identify more and more things. The ability to offload, as we said, and offload's kind of a crazy word, but the ability to put data from Protect and Protect Plus on immutable storage, so cause worm, right? Another key feature that we're doing to make sure that clients are well protected. The fact that we integrate with tape, Pawel, as you mentioned, through Protect, another key way of getting data, that off-site set of capabilities. So that's the cyber resiliency stuff that we're doing. Around data reuse, we didn't talk so much about Spectrum Protect Plus and Spectrum CDM, but those automation and orchestration capabilities to pull data up and reuse data, the multi-cloud capability, the stuff that we're doing in our data protection portfolio, Protect Plus, and CDM, integrating with things like Azure and AWS and IBM Cloud and Google Cloud, right? So we're trying to take steps all across the portfolio to pull everything together so that this modern environment is easy, right? Because that's what helps lower costs. It lowers what you have to buy. It also lowers your operational costs. And we're putting all of this stuff into our portfolio to help kind of make the client's life a bit easier.
Yeah, and let's not forget the container-aware capabilities that we've got in our data protection, and of course, all of the enablement we've got from a container perspective for our entire storage portfolio now as well, right? So, we are making all of our storage and our data protection modern ready.
And I liked this. Steve mentioned that AI is also a crucial part of detecting the anomaly. So we know that we are just a human, so we don't have 24/7, 365 days watching what's going on with our system. So AI prevention, anomaly against the cyber resiliency attacks this is one of the parts that's I'm glad that IBM is working today.
Yeah. So Pawel, let's go back to, oh, first let me just highlight a key thing first. So one of the things that I do to help our sales team, and I do in a lot of our enablement, but I actually thought this is just as appropriate and important for clients who want to go through that learn, shop, buy. So you do a lot of the education component on your own before you even reach out to a sales rep. What are some of the things that you might want to be thinking about when thinking about a modern data protection environment, and then where would I get started, right? So, things to think about is what's driving your strategy for a modern data protection environment, or do you have a strategy, and if not, why? Things to think about: if you could improve your current backup solution, what kinds of things would you want? Have you been thinking about data reuse in your environment? Do you often get asked by different lines of business, hey, I need a copy of data for XYZ beyond just recovery? Are you looking at things like automation and orchestration within your environment, and why? How do you leverage the cloud in your data protection environment, and do you want to? So all of these things play a key role in thinking about why you want to create a modern data protection environment. And Pawel, since you're out there with customers time and time again, do you have other questions that come up or in mind? Did I catch you off?
Yeah, I'm here.
No?
I have some lacks. So again, Steve, sorry, apologize.
I was just asking if as you're talking to other clients out there, are there other questions that you have that people often ask yourself about or ask you about when thinking about creating a modern environment? Why would I want to take those steps? Or does this cover it pretty well?
It's all the question is pretty well giving the quiet answers, but this is what I'm thinking when I'm talking with the customers is the first question is the most important for me. So what is the next step? What is the next level? What should we like to achieve in the end? Yes, and let's talk not only about the data restoration, because it's an obvious part. At least I'm used to work with the spectrum protect in the end. So for my part, it's more obvious that we can easily restore. But what is the next step? How to play?
Hey, Pawel, can I challenge you on the restoration part? Because
go on.
One of the things that we find is when customers have some sort of outage, let's say they have some sort of mechanical outage with their storage, what we find is a lot of their data recovery and data disaster recovery tactics haven't been tested. And in the world of inevitability of cyber attacks, or the fact that things break eventually, I think that practice is really poor business, right? And so one of the things that we pride ourselves in IBM is that, backup is worthless if you can't recover. So, and the fact that we've got such a long history of reliable recovery, and the fact that we've got, various mechanisms that can provide that. But I think that fundamentally, if you don't have, the thing that cyber resiliency brings to bear is the need to have a tested, proven ability to recover should and when you have that outage. So, that's where I want to challenge you on the recovery part is obvious. I think that people take it for granted, don't test it, don't build it into a best practice and culture of expectation as much as they should.
So this is the key point. Why? So let's say the biggest the bottleneck in the backup platforms is the time for the administrators today and the IT specialists. So it's not that they don't want to test it; they don't have actually a time today nowadays.
Yeah.
They have more and more tasks to do it. So this is this point that Steve mentioned: automation, orchestration. So that's why I love Modernize, because Modernized Data Protection gives you the REST API to fully orchestrate the things that we don't want to, do it every day. So right. Imagine that even if you will have if you love your job, but if you will get the information you need to every day for the 4 hours get the restoration process done, everybody will start to hate it. So if we will automate this process, and if we can easily apply and ingest the process, how to validate daily, I'm not talking about the monthly or quarterly or even yearly, the process, but daily process. So this is how we can use, this is what also the data reuse means, the full assurance that my backup is doing in a proper way.
Well, and to your point, one of the benefits of having secondary use is that you can test some of that recovery, right? You can mount that data, you can connect your hosts to it, and
you can do it on the same environment as your backup system is.
Exactly.
So this secondary means that you don't need to think about where to store, restore, and how to cope with the daily tests. Everybody can be automated on the secondary storage.
Rob, I think Rob, you brought up probably the most important point on this whole session is if it's not tested, right, for any particular reason, whether it be DR or cyber resiliency, then you haven't taken the right steps to fulfill the practice that you need to make sure that you can recover, because ultimately that's what you want to do. Paul, you bring up some great points about, and we should have brought those up too, around the automation and orchestration of automating a DR test, because you're right, the most valuable and precious thing that you have in your environment is time.
Yeah.
And Rob, finally, I think you've hit it a couple of times. There is a lot of pride at IBM, and one of the things that we do take very, a lot of pride in is our business resiliency services. So we actually have a whole practice built around the capabilities around cyber resiliency and business resiliency services. So if you're looking for a helping hand in getting started and where to look and what to do, obviously, leveraging our products and capabilities and how they can be even more helpful to what you're doing, I highly encourage you to have a look and see how IBM can help you do that as well, because it's something we take pretty seriously here at IBM. All right, so Paul, one more, and so you've been a big advocate. I think, IBM, an older company, maybe didn't jump on the social bandwagon as fast or quick as we should have, or stay current. And Paul, you've been doing a tremendous job getting our Spectrum Protect professionals group on LinkedIn going, and some of the things you're doing with the Friday dose, which I find pretty cool. I was on an episode sharing information. I wonder if you just want to give a quick commercial about the Friday dose.
Okay, so the first thing is you should go on LinkedIn and find the Spectrum Protect professional group. We are nearly 1,000. So I checked today, it's 994 people. So it's getting bigger and bigger group. And the Friday dose, it's all about to get in fun and talking about the technology. Yes. So we get in the best specialists from the market. We talk about the backup approach. We're talking about the storage. We're talking about everything that is touching the data itself. So definitely you need to see the episode with Steve. Is one of the best, not because the Steve is here, but many people just send me the messages that is really, really good. And you see the backup monster on the right down corner, and the backup monster is the representation of our modernized data protection. So the monster is funny, the monster is eager to protect the data. The monster is looking for the new opportunities. It's looking for the customers to helping them to grab the data and help them to assure that they're in a safe place. That's why we still, work each other. We like each other. We speak about the technology because we do believe that the backup monster is also representing this is what the IBM did in the last 25 years.
Great. So, Rob, any closing thoughts?
Come off mute. No, thanks, Steve.
Very good. Paul, any closing thoughts on our webinar?
I felt like we've been in San Francisco a month ago, so it was really, really good. And looking for next this kind of the session with you guys. So hopefully it's not the last time. I think we put many of the good topics during the last 30 minutes. And let's wait for the comments. Maybe we'll have some additional question and we'll come back in a few weeks, I guess.
Great. Well, from my side, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen. I want to thank everybody who takes the time to listen from the download. Paul, I want to thank you for everything that you're doing within the LinkedIn group and helping us capture and learn more about data protection. I think this is a very key, important topic. And with that, I'll say thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Cheers.